The rise of the virtual neighborhood. Neighbors across the country are turning to Nextdoor in the middle of this crisis to communicate, to barter, to run errands for each other. In my own neighborhood, we organized a neighborhood clap for the healthcare workers on Nextdoor. There are Easter scavenger hunts being planned on Nextdoor right now. But there's also a dark side to some of these communities. We spoke about that and more with Nextdoor CEO Sarah Friar and the CEO of one of the businesses that can be found on Nextdoor, Helen Russell of Equator Coffees. Take a listen to that conversation.
We saw at the beginning of the crisis, people just asking for information. It's been really important that we have the most accurate real-time information from public agencies, like, for example, Governor Newsom here in California, Governor Cuomo in New York. Beyond that, then we started to see people asking for help or giving help. In fact, I would say initially, wave was, I want to help you. What do you need? And it took a little while for, I think, people to be willing to put their hand up on the other side. But we very definitively see people running grocery errands for the elderly or getting a prescription for someone that may be sick. Then we started to get even more specific. So things like help me homeschool my kids and join a group around that, or I have elderly parents at a distance. How will I deal with that? And I think now we're segueing into help us help local businesses. And I know we're going to talk to Helen in a moment, but very definitively the conversation has shifted gears into I love my local business. What can we do in the hour of need?
So, before we get to that, user engagement, I know, has soared. You said upwards of 80%. Talk to us a little bit about how much more engagement you're seeing and where those users are coming from.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So we have seen daily active users up 80% on a month-over-month basis. And we're actually seeing a lot of net new people come to the platform as well. As you know, Nextdoor is in 11 countries. So we've seen it across the board from Italy to Spain, France, the UK, Australia, Canada, the US, right? Every country's gone through its own wave. And as you know, Nextdoor is in every community. So frankly, it's rural communities, it's urban, it's suburban. It really hasn't mattered. They have all come to the platform right now because they see this need and this power of proximity. We also can look at it by things like other demographic information. And again, we see no real difference. When people are in need in a crisis, it turns out it doesn't matter who you are, your neighbor is often who you need to turn to.
Now, Helen, you're on Nextdoor as a business. How have some of the new features that they've launched for businesses helped you?
Well, Nextdoor has been so important to be able to put on Nextdoor. We just launched an app at Equator Coffees in downtown Mill Valley. And so immediately I went to Nextdoor to announce that because, as you know, coffee companies, coffee shops are where the local community goes to talk about local events and global events. So Nextdoor has become that digital Cheers, if you will. And then being able to put that on there immediately, we got so many responses saying, oh my goodness, Equator is going to be open on Friday, and everybody showed up. We had 6 feet of distancing. We wanted to make sure that we had the precautions in place before we did open. So we had little tigers stepped out every 6 feet, and we had an app, so it was totally cashless. So that's been going on now for a week and a half, and we're going to open our Fort Mason store tomorrow. Anything that we can do to try to keep the team that's at the roastery roasting coffee and those baristas that we didn't need to lay off are now behind the bars.
Sarah, as much as there are wonderful and beautiful things happening on Nextdoor, it's also at times been a place where you see things like fear-mongering, complaining, conspiracy theories. And, I'm wondering what you're doing about some of these things, especially at a time when people are really scared.
Yeah, it's incredibly important and we take it really seriously. So as a starting point, remember Nextdoor has community guidelines and we expect that neighbors joining the platform abide by those community guidelines. Second, we have created some technology, a pop-up that happens that if you're posting about, for example, COVID-19, it actually asks you to think about sourcing it. Make sure this is coming from a source that you trust. If you're starting to talk about things like social distancing, make sure that you're just talking with compassion. Remember, everyone's going through a lot right now. Beyond that, we of course want to make sure that we're norming people to show the right behaviors and rewarding them when they show those right behaviors. And that's where I think some of just the pieces that we've added to the platform, like the ability to like something, the ability to love something, the ability to react positively really starts to come into its own. And then finally, on the accuracy of information point, as I talked about earlier, we do work really closely with public agencies. And I think because Nextdoor was founded on trust, because we verify members, people really do trust the information they see there. And so we've done a lot to elevate that up in the newsfeed. So you actually get a daily roll up of what our public agencies telling you in real time, which is making it a need for people to go to daily to check.
Now, and you're right that the verification process is quite intense, having gone through it myself. I'm like, why can't I get in? I checked my own Nextdoor last night just to see what the tone was, and one of my own neighbors had a post about suggesting that you tell gardeners to stay home but pay them anyway. And then she wrote, I would appreciate any responses in a thoughtful tone. I'm pretty distressed by the level of vitriol on Nextdoor these days. The biggest social networks like Facebook and Twitter historically were really hands-off about the content on their platforms in the name of free speech. They've tried to clamp down more recently, but it really infected the early culture of those platforms. What is your sort of philosophy here in terms of sort of letting people be themselves, which sometimes might not be so polite, and creating a community that's healthy?
Yeah, no, I mean, we feel strongly that when you join Nextdoor, you are joining a neighborhood community, and our purpose is to cultivate kindness. And so we're actually quite explicit about that there are a set of guidelines. So we're not a free speech platform. We are very much a platform that is about moderation. So neighbors you can clearly moderate content. You can say this content is not appropriate. Beyond that, as we've talked about, we will often put up interstitials. We have one called Kindness Reminder. And again, that was working with a lot of academics to slow people down. Because when people show vitriol, it's usually because they're in the moment, right? A lot of platforms drive you to faster engagement, right? Because they just want you to post, post, post. We actually want to slow you down, which is why we do that pop-up. We want you to have a think about why that thing you're about to say could even get reviewed in a future state. So we're kind of tugging on something behavioral psychologists know, which is that people behave better when they think something will get reviewed. And we've seen a huge impact from Kindness Reminder in the same way we're seeing a fairly huge impact from the safety reminder around COVID-19. So we don't sit back at all. We very much lean into this because we want it to be a community that's founded on kindness.